Welcome to City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Greg McPherson, president of City Club. For 100 years, City Club of Portland is where civic-minded people come together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live, work, and explore. We're gathered at the Sentinel Hotel along with all of you listening on OPB or viewing on Portland Community Media or YouTube. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners enables us to put on the state's best civic programs week after week. Our media partner is Oregon Business Magazine, and our current Friday Forum sponsors are Morel Inc., Northwest Natural, Chevron Corporation, and Echo Northwest. Please show our appreciation for all of them. Joining us today are two candidates for the Oregon Republican Party gubernatorial nomination, who I will describe briefly in alphabetical order. Alan Alley is an engineer and executive who spent a long career in the technology industry, including co-founding Pixelworks. He then served as Deputy Chief of Staff under Governor Ted Kulongoski. He has twice run for statewide Oregon office. From 2011 to 2013, Alan Alley served as chair of the Oregon Republican Party. Bud Pierce is a physician practicing oncology in Salem. He has served in the U.S. Marine Corps and the U.S. Naval Reserve. He has been a professor of medicine at OHSU and president of the Oregon Medical Association. This is Bud Pierce's first bid for public office. Moderating today's debate is Dr. Eric Fruits, a professor on the economics faculty at PSU with expertise in finance and statistics. He is the former chair of the Multnomah County Republican Party and serves on the City Club's research board. Please welcome the candidates and our moderator to City Club.
Welcome to City Club's primary debate, which is part of City Club's Friday Forum. I'm Eric Fruits, and I'm joined by two candidates for the Republican nomination for Oregon Governor, Bud Pierce and Alan Alley, who will deliver their opening statements in just a moment. But first, just a quick note on the format. Candidates will deliver 2-minute opening remarks and 2-minute closing remarks. My job is to ensure that the two candidates have equal time and that we get to hit on some of the important issues facing Oregon. I ask that the audience here at Sentinel refrain from applause during the course of the conversation. So please join me now in welcoming our candidates, Alan Alley and Bud Pierce. A coin toss determined that Alan Alley will begin with his 2-minute opening remarks. Or Bud Pierce will open with his opening remarks.
I won the coin toss. Ready to go? All right, first of all, I'm honored that you would be here today. I'm Dr. Bud Pierce, Republican candidate for governor of Oregon. I appreciate you spending your time with me and to the visitors who are listening. What I'd like you to know about me is I'm a janitor's kid. I remember where I came from, and I know who I am. I'm a Marine. I say what I mean what I say. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, and I have the courage to do it. I'm a cancer doctor. I am a small business owner. I have a great love and affection for my patients and citizens, and I aim to be the governor of everyday Oregonians. The Republican Party needs reform. We need to return to the roots of Abraham Lincoln, the great president of freedom and unity. We need to return to the great president Teddy Roosevelt, who stood for a square deal, a fair deal, and would break up monopolies that were harmful. We need to return to Mark Hatfield's morality, and we need to return to the great Tom McCall's environmentalism. That is a great past of the Republican Party and a great future for us. In terms of policy, there are some policy imperatives. We need to help get the homeless off the streets. We need to help them get training and education and return them to the dignity of a great job. We need to help the mentally ill be treated so they don't live in our streets and fill our prisons. We need to give every Oregonian the dignity of a great job because it's through great work that our lives are anchored and we have meaning in our lives. Finally, we have to help each other live with one another in a free society. When disputes arise, rather than use a heavy hand of government, we must provide reconciliation and mediation to solve the problems one at a time so that we may live in peace and in harmony. I thank you very much for listening and coming today, and I look forward to this debate. Thank you.
And those were Bud Pierce's opening remarks, and now we'll turn to Alan Alley's opening remarks.
I want each of you to imagine Oregon. What is your vision of Oregon? What is the Oregon that's in your heart? What's the educational system you want? What are the economic opportunities that you want to have? What's the transportation infrastructure? And what is the equity that we want to have for our children? Think about your vision of Oregon. And I ask you, does that vision include the lowest graduation rates in the country? Educators used to say, thank goodness for Mississippi. Now they say, thank goodness for Oregon. Does it include more people relying on food stamps to feed their families than pretty much every other state in the country? Does it include a DHS foster care system that failed on every possible measure? Our education system gets an F. Our DHS foster system gets a 0. Does your vision of Oregon include a DEQ where we test thousands and thousands of vehicles, yet we hardly ever get any return on that investment, and we miss things like arsenic and cadmium? Does it include $195 million spent on a bridge or $310 million spent on a website? Does it include 4,000 homeless people that live in the shadows of our greatest city, and our solution is a Bud Clark Commons at $1,000 a square foot? You probably know I worked in a Democratic administration. Bud's been doing a good job of letting you know that. What I learned is that whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, the head of the AFL-CIO or the teachers union, your vision, your aspirational desire for Oregon is the same. We have to get back to that. We have to get back. The system in Salem is failing us. We have to make Salem accountable to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan Alley, for your opening remarks. Now we're going to turn to the questions. The questions were submitted by City Club members and then compiled by the Friday Forum Committee and then collated by us as a group. So let's begin with the elephant in the room, and I don't really mean the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the donkey in the room. Mathematically speaking, there is no way either of you can be governor without getting thousands of Democrats and/or non-affiliated voters to cast their ballots for you instead of Kate Brown. And let's just face it, a lot of Oregonians find Kate Brown pretty darn likable. Bud Pierce, how will you get those Democrats and non-affiliateds to cross party lines to vote for you?
Sure. So I have a compelling story of leadership and bringing people together, and we're going to tell that story. We're going to tell that through all forms of media, including television, radio, social media, newsprint. We're going to remind people that our current leadership is failing us. We're going to remind people that we have gridlock in the Portland area, traffic gridlock. We have an educational system that's struggling. We have unaffordable housing. We have homelessness. We can't deal with the mentally ill. So again, the current leadership is failing us, and frankly, that's why I run. There's no other reason to run. In terms of my approach, I'm going to continue to go where Republicans seemingly don't want to go. I've been to the OEA political conference where I was surprised to find a third of the people in the room standing and applauding me when I walked in to give a speech on education because a third of their members are Republicans. No other Republican was there. I went to the Black Political Convention, and a nice gentleman after I spoke said, I work for Vic Atia. Thanks for coming. I have a strong Latino outreach. I believe that Latino voters, especially who are family-oriented, work hard, and have a religious affiliation, are natural Republican voters that we need to attract. I feel strongly that the people will respond to a message of hope, and that I have that message to give, and by going out and making the Republican Party inclusive and reaching out and inviting people in, that we can win this election.
Alan Alley, how will you convince Democrats and non-affiliateds that they should vote for you instead of Governor Brown?
I've worked in a bipartisan manner since I got into politics. I went into the governor's office, and the other two folks in the governor's office were Chip Terhune, he was the former head of the teachers union, and Tim Nesbitt, the former head of the AFL-CIO. And we sat down, and with respect for each other's background and experience, we'd share those experiences. And we'd work collaboratively on what we needed to do to move Oregon forward. Now, did I agree with them all the time? No. I'll give you an example. Low carbon fuel standard. The low carbon fuel standard at that time didn't make any sense. It doesn't save any CO2. We talked, we worked through it. We didn't move that forward in 2007. They did move it forward in 2009 and then in 2015. I would also campaign in the Multnomah County area like I was running for Multnomah County Commissioner. We did this in 2008 when I ran for state treasurer. The result was I actually got more votes in Multnomah County than any Republican other than Ronald Reagan. Over 100,000 votes in Multnomah County. That's more than Gordon Smith ever got. That's more than Chris Dudley ever got. And the way I did it was going out and meeting people and talking people and connecting with people on a very personal level. It's actually very straightforward and very possible to do that. And that's what we need to do in order to change this political class cabal that we have in Salem and get them focused back on the citizens.
Okay, so now we had the elephant in the room, we had the donkey in the room. Let's talk about the Trump in the room. The rough and tumble of the presidential race has caused damage to the Republican brand, especially here in Oregon. There's a real risk that you, as a candidate for governor, will get painted with a Trump brush. Alan Alley, with Trump likely to lead the ticket, how can you, as a Republican in Oregon, convince Oregonians that things look different here?
The political atmosphere is certainly highly charged right now, and there are a lot of people that are getting engaged for the first time, whether it's for Bernie Sanders or whether it's for Donald Trump. And the thread that connects them all is they're saying, look, this isn't working for me. It might be working for you. It might be working for somebody in Salem. It might be working for the guys that got paid for the bridge. It might be working for the guys that got paid for the website, but it's not working for me because my schools aren't working for me, and the DEQ isn't working for me, and foster care isn't working for me. And that's a unifying theme this year where we finally wake up and we say, you know what, enough is enough, and we've got to make a change, and this is the year to do that. And that's what's awakened in this political season here. Whether it's Donald Trump or anybody else, that's what's been awakened. Now, for me, I'll support the Republican nominee. I expect to support the Republican nominee and move forward with that.
Bud Pierce, how will you deal with the fallout from having Trump at the top of our November ballot?
So democracy is speaking. We should trust the democratic process and representative democracy. Republican voters are deciding that Donald Trump is to be our nominee, and the Democrats are still selecting their nominee. We should respect that, and I, as a Republican, will certainly support the Republican nominee in a race against either Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. I think it is important for Democrats out there, and I know there are a lot of you out there, to realize that on the Republican side, over the past 8 years, there was a great amount of concern that if Barack Obama was elected and reelected, that society would come to an end. I heard that message from a lot of people. Clearly, our country and our state is strong, and we will elect the right person for President of the United States. I have confidence in the voters. I have a completely different life script than Donald Trump. I'm a doctor. I'm a small business owner. I've been a servant leader in what I've done. I've not been a CEO. I've not been an entrepreneur. So that's what I'm going to tell Oregon's voters. I'm also telling Oregon's voters that we need to hearken back to the great legacy Republicans of the past and create a great future. We need to be absolutely inclusive so that when we have party gatherings, we have all kinds of people present, and that's what I'm going to present to the voters, and I believe that's a winning message.
This is a very strange race for governor, mainly because whoever's elected will serve just a 2-year term. If one of you makes it to the governor's mansion, then just 2 years from now, you'll probably be sitting in this room again making the case for re-election. Bud Pierce, at the end of your 2-year term, what would you expect to be your biggest accomplishment?
I think it's a great opportunity, and one of the selling points of our race will be give us a 2-year try. If you're tired of political failure, give a Republican a 2-year try to see what we can do, and if we don't do a good job, you have an option 2 years later. Again, my vision is focused. We need to get the homeless off the street and get them into some kind of temporary housing and shelter, train them up, and get them the dignity of a great job. I want to have a robust mental health program so the mentally ill are no longer going to jail or living on the streets. I'm going to drive small business entrepreneurship. I think we need to have tax credits for entrepreneurs. I think we need to have some kind of partial loan guarantees for the banks that loan to small entrepreneurs. I think that's what we're missing more than anything in our business climate today and economic climate today. It is small business formation outside of technology. Finally, I want us to have made real progress on the social issues that tear us apart and divide us. I want people to know that when they are free people and they have disagreements, that we're going to, again, help them mediate and reconciliate their differences, and people can be free to be who they are, state clearly what they are, not face the threat of job termination for saying the wrong thing at work, which is really not a free society, and these are the things we can and will accomplish.
Alan Alley, 2 years from now, what successes as governor would you expect to point to?
You have to focus on education. I think that's the elephant in the room, no pun intended. We spend a lot of money on education, about $400,000 per classroom. Yet there's only about $100,000 that ever gets into the classroom. We have the shortest school days. We have the shortest school year. We have among the largest class sizes in the country. When President Obama came out here and we were featuring what's the shining light of our education system to show what innovations we're doing, we used Lego League and First Robotics. Do you realize at the time there were zero public dollars that we'd invested in Lego League or First Robotics? It was all done by contributions, yet it was the single most important thing that we showed the President of the United States. How can the most important thing be the lowest priority? We have to put the money in the classroom first, fund the teachers, fund the experience in the classroom, fund technology in the classroom, fund things like the OMSI science camps and those sort of experiential learning, fund robotics. And then whatever money's left over, then you allocate it to all the overhead positions. And I think what you're going to find is those overhead positions are not going to get funded. The second thing is budget transparency and how we manage the government. We're going to put it up online, let everybody get on, look at it, talk about it, help group source the budget and budget transparency. That's how we're going to manage the government.
If you're just tuning in on OPB, you're listening to City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Eric Fruit, City Club member and Oregon economist. I'm here with two candidates running for a Republican nomination for Oregon Governor, Bud Pierce and Alan Alley. Just minutes after taking office, Governor Brown promised to make transparency a hallmark of her administration. Yet she seems to go out of her way to stymie public records requests. The latest legislative session was noteworthy for closed-door meetings with the governor, resulting in sweeping last-minute changes to major legislation. She even went so far as to silence the state's Public Utility Commission from speaking out on key energy legislation. It seems that no matter what level of government you're at in Oregon, the more a politician promises transparency, the less they deliver on that promise. Alan Alley, in what ways will you demonstrate your commitment to government transparency?
Looping back to what I just said, the government budget is incredibly complex. It's almost $70 billion if you include the all funds budget. It is $70 billion. No one person or a small group of people can ever comprehend it. We've got to post it online and make it transparent in a computer-readable form so that you can click on the line items and you can actually compare the budgets across years and you can bore down. We did this in 2010. We did it in a little prototype. And people got on and they blogged about it and they talked about it. And one of the things that they found was they came back and said, Alan, do you realize that the Oregon Department of Transportation looks like it's about twice the size of Colorado's? And it turns out it's actually true. Now, we've got to get down to the next level of, well, why is that true? Colorado's a little bit bigger and has larger population. Why is that true? Are we inefficient in how we're building the roads? Or is it that we don't mine aggregate along the West Coast anymore and we bring it over from the East? We have to have that kind of transparency and then invite people in to look at the budget and work on the budget with us. That's the only way we're going to solve these problems. It's all done in a cloistered environment right now. The low carbon fuel standard was a great example of that, where it's shuttled through, no transparency on it. It doesn't save any CO2, yet it's going to cost you money. That's not the way we're supposed to do it. We have to do this differently. We have to take Salem back from the cabal that's been down there for the last 30 years.
Bud Pierce, your website promises that transparency would be an essential part of your administration. How would you show that?
Sure. So light is the enemy of darkness. And I've lived through transparency in medicine. 20 years ago, if you saw me as a patient, your record was mine. I could put whatever I want in there, and you may or may not have access to it. It's gotten much, much better. These days, you can log on to the portal and see us as we put the information in. Some people said it would inhibit honesty. No, what it inhibits is bad thinking and bad writing and bad record keeping. So having to be transparent helps people to behave better and to make better decisions. As a governor, we're able to make the executive branch and all the agencies absolutely transparent. The way you do that is you demand transparency. You say, if you want a record, you got it. If you want my calendar, you got it. There's nothing that's going to be hidden. I think you invite the press in. I believe that when you have negotiations with caucuses, you don't say we're going to discuss it behind closed doors and then we're going to bring you out and we're going to pretend that we're having a discussion. The governor says, bring your ideas from your caucus. Let's sit down. We talk about it openly with press present, with any citizen group presence that are relevant, and we'll have our discussion. That's a way that we will ensure that we have light in government.
Tens of thousands of Oregonians get their health insurance through the Obamacare exchanges. Just a few days ago, these unlucky folks found out that they're going to get hit with double-digit increases in their insurance premiums. Many Oregonians have seen their health insurance premiums double since Obamacare went into effect. Bud Pierce, with your decades of experience in healthcare, what would be your cure? As a governor with no control over federal policies, what would be your cure for Oregon's out-of-control insurance costs?
So I get to say that despite my colleagues' comments that I have never supported the Affordable Care Act, or also known as Obamacare. But I have commented that people having insurance, more people insured, is a good thing. That's a good thing. We've gone from about 49 million uninsured to 27 million. That part has worked. The rest of it, unfortunately, has been an unmitigated failure. So there's several things we need to do. I read this morning that Oregon's health insurance costs are 34% higher than national average. We have a lot of monopolies. We have a lot of single delivery systems. We're seeing more consolidation. Without true competition in delivery of services, prices go higher. We need to make sure we have competition. We need to free up the insurance market. We have to give a lot more freedom than gold, silver, and bronze in the insurance plans so that insurances can offer a variety of insurance plans that are adequate and that we can choose from those and purchase those. There's nothing wrong with having a fallback position for people to be able to go into a CCO mechanism. Ultimately, we have to get healthier as a population. The main determinants of health are job and access to basic health care. Those are the first two most important determinants. The next four that 3% of the citizens do: don't smoke, eat good quality food, don't eat too much of it, and get 2.5 hours of exercise a week, aerobic. Just don't, just moving quickly. A brisk and active public health program to get people to be healthier is key to affording our health care.
Alan Alley, you've hinted that you're in favor of some sort of repeal of Obamacare, but what would you do as governor to stop that giant sucking sound coming out of Oregonians' bank accounts to pay for health insurance?
So we've all probably experienced this. My own health insurance went from about $150 a month to $350 a month. And the plan that I wanted to keep, I can no longer get. You've probably all experienced something very similar. The fundamental problem is there's two good things in Obamacare: portability, meaning you can carry your insurance around, and also that you can keep your children on your policy. It's 2,700 pages of legislation to get two good things out of it. We should pull out the one page that has those two good things on it and get rid of the rest of it. Now, how do you solve this? We have to get the free market back into healthcare. Health insurance right now isn't really health insurance. It's like somebody just bought you food insurance or a food policy. And what happens is you'd go to the store is incentivized to give you as much food as possible, and in fact, the most expensive food. And somehow you believe that you're supposed to take the most expensive food. You never ask the price. In fact, you don't even know what the price is. You don't even know what the alternatives are. How can we operate a system where the incentives just spiral up the cost on both sides? The providers are incentivized to spiral up the cost, and you're incentivized to take more. We have to put a system in place with some kind of health savings account that puts your choice back in the healthcare equation.
Portland has made national news with high levels of toxic heavy metals near a local glass company. Some see this as the market's failure to monitor itself. Others see it as a government failure to enforce existing rules. Portland City Club was ahead of the curve with its report in 2013 called Invisible Enemies, Reducing Air Toxics in the Portland Airshed. Bud Pierce, as governor, how would you allocate state resources to make sure we don't have another bullseye glass problem while you were governor?
Well, again, this is a perfect idea of public-private partnership. We need to have an efficient regulatory agency, the DEQ, overseeing the production of products that include toxic metals. I'm an oncologist. About 90% of cancers are environmental. There's legitimate data that shows that toxic chemicals can lead to cancer, so I'm critically aware of this. We need to gather and follow the latest scientific recommendations. We need to have work groups between industry and government. I have the idea of a dual mandate of government agencies. One is regulatory, to oversee the necessary regulations and work together with businesses to ensure that we get the right result. When businesses or industries are fearful of government oversight, they tend to hide things. I want to break down that fear. I want the idea that we're all on the same side. Of course, we have to have surprise inspections. Of course, we have to keep track. Of course, we have to measure. But an antagonistic relationship in any agency oversight function is detrimental to the actual oversight and is detrimental to the prosperity of the business. So again, by encouraging and requiring government and private sector to come together for our common good, for environmental protection, and for the prosperity of business, the job can get done.
Alan Alley, bullseye glass seems to be a symptom of a much bigger problem. Is that bigger problem business run amok or government out of control?
Well, let me ask you all something. How many of you take your car to the DEQ to get tested? Raise your hand. Okay, pretty much everyone. How many of you have ever failed that test? Right. Why on earth are we doing this? Right? There's like, everybody raised their hand. There's 4 people that raised their hand that have ever in your entire life failed that test. Why do we have all that infrastructure in place? Why do we make you go through it? Why do we reduce your individual productivity by making you go through that when it returns nothing? Right? And then we have a problem with arsenic and cadmium. And what they're going to tell you is there's no resources. We don't have the money to do this. We have the money to do it. It's just applied in the wrong place. And that perspective that I just gave you, that simple analysis, it just doesn't happen in Salem. Nobody thinks that way. They think, oh, we have all this DEQ infrastructure and we just have to kind of keep doing it. And we'll do it a little bit better. As a matter of fact, they have done it a little bit better. The service is definitely better. But it's absolutely not needed. Your cars are guaranteed by federal government for 150,000 miles or 10 years. We're testing something that by definition can't be failing, or there's a lawsuit. So that's the kind of perspective that we need to bring, use the resources more effectively.
Oregon's governor is not only the lead policymaker in state government, but is also the chief administrator of a state government of about 60,000 people. Bud Pierce, what skills do you bring that would make you the best manager of the state's bureaucracy?
So I have vast experience in leadership. We grew our small business from one site, half a dozen employees, to 75 employees, 4 sites. I have a military training experience in leadership, and I've been a leader of many nonprofit boards and organizations that have raised millions of dollars, frankly, for the common good. I have a keen sense for what needs to be done in organizations. When you study what's gone wrong with Oregon's administrative structure and you compare it to the era of Vicatia, you will notice that the executive department has been weakened greatly so that the governor doesn't have nearly the influence over the agencies. You'll notice that the commissions, which used to oversee the agency directors, have been greatly weakened. And we find that that old structure, where you had a strong executive department which would do the work of the governor in overseeing the agencies and make sure they're performing well, and to have great commissioners that assist as a board would do on the oversight of the executive director, are probably critical and fundamental to having the right kind of oversight over our agencies. Agency reform must happen in order for us to get a lean and frugal and productive government that aids Oregonians in their daily lives, and I'm committed and I'm experienced in making that happen.
Alan Alley, Republicans love to say that government should be run more like a business. Okay, what business lessons would you apply to manage all these employees in state government?
So first of all, the failures that we're having across multiple of the departments, it's not just a symptom, it's a disease, and we have to fix it. We have to replace the head of every department. We also have to replace the boards and commissions. And then we have to put together a playbook where the board and the commission is actually going to function like an oversight board. Today, they're coffee and donut boards. I've been on some of these boards. Bud probably has too. And if you give me a maple bar, I'm distracted for about 90 minutes. And you can show me pretty much anything, and I'll just kind of nod and drink my coffee and eat my maple bar because Debbie doesn't let me have them. So that's one thing we do. The second thing is unleash the power of the employees. On my walk across Oregon, I actually ran into a road crew, an ODOT road crew. And they said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm walking across Oregon." And they called the Health and Human Services to come pick me up. But they were blacktopping a road that didn't need to be covered. It didn't need to be chip sealed. And I said, "What are you guys doing?" They said, "Well, we're sealing this road." I said, "Why would you do that?" They go, "Well, they told us to do it, and that's why we're doing it." I said, "In the town of Mitchell, those roads are terrible." They said, "Yeah, I know." I said, what if we incentivized you and you could save about 10% of what you do and you could spend it however you wanted to? What do you think of that? They go, "That's amazing. We'd love to do that." I didn't have to give them a bonus. You didn't have to give them a check. All you had to give them is the dignity of direction. Thank you.
If you're just tuning in on OPB, you're listening to City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Eric Fruits, City Club member, and I'm here with two candidates running for the Republican nomination for Oregon Governor, Alan Alley and Bud Pierce. Now on to the fun stuff. To many Oregonians, PERS is a four-letter word, but over the next few years, it's going to be a four-letter word that's going to be coming out of everyone's lips. We are set for a huge explosion in PERS costs that will affect the budgets of every level of government in Oregon. That explosion is set to go off just as your two-year term as governor would be ending. Bud Pierce, how would you as governor try to defuse this ticking time bomb?
So I was asked this day I announced in September of 2015. The Supreme Court has told us what we're allowed to do. There's a money match payout component, an annuity rate that has been artificially high, 6, 7, or 8% for newly retiring employees. That can be market-based. There's a side account. There's a up to 6% of the employee's salary, 401k type. All or part of that money can be put in to support the system. Of note, in the average in the United States, public employees contribute 22% of their wages into the system to support the system. The Supreme Court has also told us that every employee that is currently retired, we're not going to touch that. They've been clear. And the people are retired that are on a retirement plan right now that were hired, that will not change. So those two things, money match, getting some public employee contribution, maybe from their side account, maybe again from their going forward contribution is critical, and we're allowed to do that. The system is $21 billion in arrears, but actually that's based on getting a 7.75% return going forward on our $70 billion invested. If you use a 4% return, the deficit may be triple, quadruple, or 5 times that amount. We're going to have to take money from the general fund and backfill some of the agencies, the school districts, the cities and counties, in exchange for reform. It's not putting more money into a broken system. It's hard to accept reform. Together with more money will get us there.
Alan Alley, you're a numbers guy. Would you be able to stop this PERS explosion?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sure you had more, though.
I do. First of all, you have to protect the existing employees and the existing retirees. That's been determined. We will protect them. We'll live up to those obligations. You have to accept that as a baseline. Now, what they don't tell you is this $92 billion liability actually grows to be $120 or $150 billion if we don't do anything about it. There's not enough GDP in the state to cover that. So what do? A couple of simple things and you can get this under control. The first is for new employees hiring in, and only for new employees hiring in, you put them on a defined contribution plan. That's like a 401k. They contribute some money, the state can match it. It can be very lucrative. You can do like 10%. In the private sector, it's very unusual to find something that lucrative, but you can do that. What that does is, by definition, your unfunded liability disappears over time because you've structurally created something that can't have an unfunded liability. The second thing is, and it sounds really simple, hire less people than the number that retire. It's very straightforward. And over time, you start working that number down. Now, what do? You add computer systems, software, and technology to make the remaining people more productive. And believe me, our state employees are under-resourced when it comes to the computer systems and the software and the technology and the training. So you can invest in those employees, make them more productive, and you can actually solve this problem.
All right, so this is a Republican debate, which means that we must talk about taxes. And the big one coming up is IP 28. IP 28 is a corporate tax increase that is almost certain to hit in November, in the November ballot. The former state economist has described IP 28 as a sales tax on steroids. Alan Alley, now here's the weird part. If voters approve IP 28, of course Oregon consumers are going to be paying hundreds of dollars more a year in taxes, but you, as governor, would be sitting on a gusher of cash. Now what?
Well, IP 28 is a complete and total disaster and a sham. They're trying to pitch this as a tax on sales that out-of-state corporations will pay. And they're trying to make you believe that a tax on sales is not a sales tax, right? It is a sales tax. If Ford sells a truck to the dealership, it's 2.5%. When they sell that truck to you, it's 2.5%. You think Ford's going to pay it? You think the dealership's going to pay it? You're going to pay it. In fact, it's the most regressive, punitive type of sales tax you could ever possibly imagine, because it's on your electric bill, it's on your fuel bill, it's on your food, it's on your pharmaceuticals, and you're going to pay it. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, this is going to be the answer that they have for all these problems, that just $5 billion more, just $5 billion more will solve it. We've increased spending $27 billion in the past 10 years. Did that solve anything? Is anything, 27 billion is 63%. Is anything 63% better than it was 10 years ago? Are your roads 63% better? Are your class sizes 63% smaller? Can you name anything? Yet the entire state budget went up by $27 billion. It's not a money issue. It's a use the resources more effectively issue.
Bud Pierce, IP 28, consumers are going to be paying a lot more, but you as the new governor are going to be sitting on all that money. How are you going to resist?
So the proponents of IP 28 have done an economic analysis. They said they wouldn't release it because it wasn't relevant. During the last legislative session, they analyzed a 0.39% gross receipts tax on receipts of $1 million or more, much less than the current proposal. That would cost 15,000 private sector jobs and grow 5,500 public sector jobs. The average family will pay $500 a year more in cost, and affluent families will pay thousands of dollars more. So if we happen to pass IP 28, there's a clear and compelling answer. Send money back to Oregon citizens in the form of tax relief. Aim for middle and low-income taxpayers. People who make minimum wage shouldn't pay any taxes. I don't believe that at all, the current minimum wage. We should bolster our earned income tax credit program to get more federal money into our state for low-paid workers. We can also then have money and funding to sponsor our entrepreneurs, to give partial loan credits to banks who loan to our entrepreneurs, and again, to try to undo some of the damage. We would use some of that money to backfill the PERS deficit no matter really how we approach it in the long term, in the short term needs to be made up. So that money can be received, pushed back out into the citizenry, back out to create great new goods and services, and that's the only thing that's going to bring us forward.
Teen unemployment in Oregon is about 8 percentage points higher than the national average. That's big. Put another way, Oregon has one of the highest rates of young people who want to work but cannot find a job. To make matters worse, Oregon's newly enacted minimum wage hike is sure to price many young people out of the workforce. To see how, read the Portland City Club's minimum wage report published last year. Alan Alley, as governor, what policies would you propose to get Oregon's young people back to work?
Well, the fundamental thing is you have to focus on creating an environment where businesses can hire people, and we don't do that. You need to do it at every single level of government. I'll give you an example of how we don't do that. When I was in the governor's office, I got a call from Freightliner, and Freightliner was going crazy. And they said, Attorney General just sued us for $300 million. I looked into it, and there was a technicality on a lawsuit settlement that caused this to happen. Yet the state of Oregon sued Freightliner for $300 million. Now, when you talk about creating an environment where people can hire people and that you can have summer internships and employment for young people, you certainly don't get there by suing, I think it was the third largest employer in the state over a technicality for $300 million. The other thing that you have to do is get the companies into the schools. Intel had a great program that we took advantage of at Pixelworks, where Intel did all the paperwork for us, and we were able to hire kids in the summertime, interns and also kids out of college. They'd get money to go back to college as a scholarship. Those are the types of things that the private sector can do as long as the government doesn't get involved and get their hands into it or sue the third largest employer in the state for $300 million.
Bud Pierce, young people want to work, they can't find jobs. What policies would you propose to get Oregon's young people back to work?
So the most important work experience of my life was being a bag boy when I was 15. The employer had no risk. I simply showed up, I behaved, I did what I was told at the base, and I worked for tips. And again, no risk to them, but it taught me how to work. It taught me how to be responsible. It taught me how to work quickly. It taught me to learn my craft, and it taught me to be polite to people. All very important to private practice medicine, as it turns out. So I am committed to helping children as they transition from late childhood into adulthood to having meaningful work. No more important life experience so that they're ready to be productive citizens in our society. Clearly, a great place to work is small business. I've outlined over and over my ideas for small business expansion, and we clearly need to come up with a training wage. There's no other answer. We need to have employers to be able to hire youth at a younger age because they can't produce enough to justify the high minimum wage we're creating. We just have to create that. We have to focus on the child. It's not to let them be exploited. It's not to let someone take advantage of them. It's to give them the necessary life experience that they can have so that then when they transition to adult life and even after their training and education, to have had the experience of work will make you a more confident and better employee, and it must be done.
If you're just tuning in on OPB, you're listening to City Club of Portland's Friday Forum with a gubernatorial debate between the Republican candidates Bud Pierce and Alan Alley. Oregon is full of smart people, just ask us. Yet our high school graduation rates are among the worst in the country. You have just 2 years to make things better. Go, Alan Alley.
Get the money in the classroom. We have, like I said before, there's a lot of money out there that we're spending. It's not being spent very efficiently. We pour it in the top in Salem, and it starts to sift through the system. And it goes through Salem. It goes through the education service districts. It goes through the school districts. Finally, it gets into the school, and a little tiny drip drops into the classroom. My wife and I do auctions all over the area. And these auctions are usually for little schools. Debbie helps organize them, and I'm the pro forma auctioneer. I pretend to be an auctioneer. And we're almost always raising money for technology in the classroom. An iPad for the kids, a Chromebook for the kids, an experiential learning thing to go to OMSI or something like that. And it always puzzles me, how can the very most important things, the things that parents will write checks for, how can that be so far down the priority list that we don't fund it? How can Lego League be so far down the priority list that we don't fund it? How can First Robotics be? Yet we fund an education service district curriculum coordinator, right? With the internet, do you really need an education service district curriculum coordinator? And yet we fund that over the necessities in the classroom. We've got to flip it around and get the money in the classroom.
Bud Pierce, 2 years to fix our schools. Can you do it?
It's about best practices. If you unfortunately have to see a doctor like me, a cancer doctor. You don't want the cancer doctor to say, well, this is what Bud Pierce thinks you should have. You want Bud Pierce to know what the best practices, the best treatments are in the country and in the world and give you that treatment. There are states that have done it better than us. I'm aware of Massachusetts educational reform. Minnesota has a better performing educational system. Let's just borrow it and implement it. It turns out that what they tend to do is they tend to return authority and accountability to the teachers in the classroom, give them curriculum control, some curriculum control, budgetary control. They tend to have charter schools and academies, maybe language academies and all kinds of innovative programs. They tend to have demands on parents to have the children in the classroom and ready to work, or help the parents if the parents are unable to do that. We need to include career technical education and build that up. There's a growing movement. There's an initiative that I support that's heading in that direction. It's really not hard. Selma and I went to the Fabian School, which is aligned with Concordia University, took Title I kids, failing school, 200 students. Now they're up to 500 people begging to get in there. The Lutherans and the public schools of Portland came together and settled their First Amendment differences. And that school has 500 kids, and they're very successful. You can go in there, see the motivated principal, the motivated teachers. It's about creating a structure for success and turning a lot of control over to the teacher in the classroom.
Cover Oregon, foster care, business energy tax credits, Oregon Wireless Interoperability Network. Each of these are huge scandals amounting to more than $1 billion in wasted money in our state. In the case of the state's foster care system, children have died from what has been described as decades of shocking abuse. All of these scandals were slow-motion train wrecks, but nothing was done until it was too late. Alan Alley, how would you use your executive experience to stop any future train wrecks before it's too late?
Well, you've just pointed out that we don't have a problem in an agency. We have a problem in how we manage the entire government. This isn't a little tiny thing that's going on. This is an epidemic that's spread across the entire government. And what you have to do is you have to change the way that you manage it. Again, when I was in Salem, after a couple of weeks, I went into the governor and I said, hey, where are the financial statements? Like income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, performance against budget, any kind of metrics, dashboard. And he said, do you think we should have stuff like that? He did. You know, the state government, if you think about this, it's 150 years old. It's grown every single year, basically, for 150 years. From a business perspective, it's called 100% gross margin. You don't actually manufacture anything. You don't make anything. You just collect taxes and you distribute it. It's a very easy business. It's also a monopoly. It isn't like we can go to Washington and buy two, get one free car registration when they have a special in Washington. You're stuck here in Oregon. There's basically no CEO, no CFO. There's also basically no board of directors, and it's run without financial statements. How inefficient do you think that is? And the fact that it gets manifested the way that it gets manifested shouldn't really be a surprise to you. After 150 years, and certainly after the last 30 years, we need to get somebody in there that has a different perspective that can change the direction.
Bud Pierce, you're a cancer doctor, and there seems to be a cancer of cronyism, corruption, and incompetence in our state. What sort of early screening would you do to stop the next scandal before it spreads?
So it's about transparency, authority, and accountability. When you talk about failure in government, you notice no one is responsible. Occasionally somebody gets sacrificed for political purposes, but there's no person responsible. It's a process that failed. We tried to build a bridge, the process failed. Cover Oregon, the process failed. Energy tax credits, the process failed. PERS, the process failed. Nobody's in charge. We need to return to the era where there are clear people in charge with decision-making, authority, and accountability, and let the press, let the public in, and see what's happening. I again already mentioned a strong executive department of the governor, a strong commission system that will allow oversight of the agency heads and work with them. And I think we have to get away from antagonism and gotcha toward working together for the common good. And if people know that they are not going to be criticized for decisions that are correctly made, and if things don't work out perfectly, they're more apt to want to accept responsibility and to make the hard decisions. We have to encourage that. We have to turn our public employees loose who will do a great job. And by doing this, we can come up with a government that functions well, is lean, and gets the job done.
In much of Oregon, housing prices are rising faster than incomes. Part of the problem is that our population is growing faster than we can build houses. Portland City Club just published a comprehensive report detailing our housing affordability. Alan Alley, is there anything you would do as governor to address housing affordability?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, when these prices are rising, as an economist, you know this, we have a supply and a demand imbalance. We have more demand than we have supply. And how would you do that? How would you structurally increase the supply? That's what we have to do, is we have to look at how do we change the zoning, how do we get things so that we can have more supply. I'll give you another example of something that we shouldn't do. The Bud Clark Commons was a solution to some of the housing problems, especially for homeless people. If you take the cost of the Bud Clark Commons and you figure out on a cost per square foot what that cost, it cost $1,000 a square foot. To put it in perspective, that's what a hospital costs. You can build LEED certified green little houses for around $180 to $200 a square foot. How can we institutionally come up with a solution that is 5 times more expensive than a great alternative solution, and nobody questions it? How can somebody not stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, it doesn't make sense to spend $1,000 a square foot to create transitional housing for homeless people? Yet the government does this over and over and over again. That money is the same money that you could use in your schools. That money is the same money that you could use for a variety of other things in this state. Yet we make these mistakes over and over and over again.
Bud Pierce, as governor, what could you do to help with housing affordability?
So we're the second least affordable state in the nation. We're behind Hawaii, and interestingly, Washington State, just north of us, very similar, second most affordable, and last year was the most affordable. And we talk about affordability, we talk about how much money you make and how much things cost, and housing clearly drives that. So we have a failure of leadership because the geography is similar, the people are similar, so our leadership has failed us. The 3 components to the cost of housing include the cost of the land, includes development fees, and the cost of the actual buildings. And it turns out that in many ways, government will inhibit the innovation of new ways of building things by delaying the approval process. So for instance, we want to build cross-laminate timber buildings in Oregon, 3, 5 stories, 10 stories, 50 stories. We have to have a lot of approvals done quickly. So what government can do is to push to have more affordable land. We can cajole and to talk to the cities and counties to try to get them to lower their systems development fees and get more lean on their part. And as industry comes up with cheaper and better ways to build houses, to rapidly implement those ideas so that the actual cost of building will be less. That's the only solution. And the final solution is come up with better paying jobs so you can afford higher priced housing.
Well, let's end this on a high note. Both of you have crisscrossed the state, and our license plates once read Pacific Wonderland. Based on what you've seen, what would you say is Oregon's hidden treasure, Alan Alley?
We have so many. In fact, when I talk to governors around the country, they usually say something like, Alan, you're from Oregon. Oregon's a great place. Don't you have the Columbia River, and you can move products on the Columbia River, you can irrigate with that, and don't you have dams and you get all that CO2-free hydropower from that? And don't you have several deep water ports? You've got multiple deep water ports, and you have ranch land and farmland and agricultural land. You got the Willamette Valley. You have trees. Trees are the greenest building product known to mankind. You have all of these assets. You've got Intel's largest facility in the world is headquartered in your state. You've got Nike's world headquarters here in your state. You have innovators here in your state. Yet you have the highest unemployment, or the lowest graduation rate in the country, and you have more families relying on food stamps than pretty much any other place. How did your government screw it up? Right? How did they screw it up? What would a state like Indiana do with our deep water ports? In fact, Mitch Daniels said to me, why don't I just buy them from you? You're not using them. Then we'd have to change the name of the city to Land. But what would Arizona do with the water? What would New Mexico do with Intel's largest facility? It would be transformational for any of those states, yet we have all of those assets here, and somehow we're not using them to the fullest extent that we could.
Bud Pierce, what are your hidden treasures that you've seen on the state?
So it's the marvelous people of Oregon. In my office, we've been talking politics for a little while as I've been seeing patients the last year and a half. And I've had tech people come in and say, Bud, if you want to fix state government, you got to fix tech. Or I've had people come in and say, Bud, when we reach consensus decision making, it may take 6 months for the simplest decision to be made. And you need to improve that if you're going to be governor. And it's when you go out to a barn with cows surrounding you and you meet some people that you walk in and think, oh, this is kind of a simple group, and I'm going to be the doctor and the governor can't have read up about farming, and I'm going to really kind of show them my stuff. And they start hitting you with land use planning and farming and zoning and all manner of irrigation, and they start firing questions at you. An incredibly talented group of people, like in this room, on the radio, and in our state, people need to be turned loose. People need to not be afraid of government. People have to be not afraid of failing as long as they're open and transparent and trying to do what's best. And if we turn our citizens loose and trust them, we will have the state that we wish to have.
Well, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to City Club's Friday Forum. We're here with two candidates running for a Republican nomination for Oregon Governor, and Bud Pierce and Alan Alley. And now they're going to deliver their 2-minute closing statements, and we will begin with Alan Alley and his closing statement.
Thank you to the City Club. Many of you here are probably not registered as Republicans. And I'm here to tell you all Republicans are not alike. We're like dogs. We're like dachshunds and Dobermans. There's differences. My mom was the first Oprah. She started a television show in the 1950s on WKZO-TV in Kalamazoo, Michigan. She created the show. She wrote the show. My mother was pregnant on television with me in the 1950s, if you can imagine that. I walked 400 miles across Oregon from Baker City to Portland. It took 35 days, and every political consultant I ever talked to said that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. It was the best experience I've ever had. I see Oregon through a different set of eyes. I drive a smart car. Now, it's a smart car with a Romney sticker and an NRA logo on the back, but it is a smart car. I play video games with my kids. I'm probably the only 61-year-old guy that knows how to play FIFA and Madden on my PlayStation 4. I've also built multiple billion-dollar companies, both as an investor and as a CEO. I'm fairly certain I'm the only Republican that's ever served in a high administrative position in a Democratic administration and then been elected as chairman of the Oregon Republican Party. I think I'm also the only Republican that ever performed on stage with Storm Large doing a Tarzan yell and set the world record for chugging a quart of beer when I was in college. I asked you at the beginning to have a vision for Oregon. We have an opportunity for that vision of Oregon, that vision that we have in our hearts, to be what we excel to and what we produce and what is reflected in our leadership. And besides, what could be more weird than electing a Republican governor? Thank you.
And now for Bud Pierce's closing statements.
So the rise of the popularity of Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders reflect deep failure of our current political class. People are dissatisfied because they see that their future is diminished and the future of their children is diminished. I offer a unique approach to leadership. I am all into being a servant leader. A servant leader is someone who listens, who elevates the citizens, who makes the citizens more powerful. It doesn't diminish, not to diminish the effectiveness of government, but to make the citizens more powerful, because the citizens can eventually lead us to the place that we want to go, not government. Government's an important ally, but they cannot lead us. We need someone who can pull us together and unify our state. We have the great East and West divide. We have the rural and urban divide. We have the Portland Metro and non-Portland Metro divide. That has to be brought together by someone who can see it, who has a vision for a brighter future. It all centers around the dignity of a great job. If people are employed, if people are working together, if people work together for a cause greater than themselves, and if the state is linked economically, Portland and non-Portland, east and west, urban and rural, then people will be able to create a better Oregon, a greater Oregon, better opportunity, better services, and we can learn to live together and accept one another and not be at war with one another. So my focus will be on that great economic success by the mechanisms I've discussed, and if we can get the dignity of a great job to the majority of Oregon's adult citizens, then we will gain the prosperity that we seek. I look forward to your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Bud Pierce and Alan Alley. Here at City Club, we say that good riches are the something of the city, and you've made us all a little bit richer. Thank you. I'll turn it over now to Greg McPherson.
We're out of broadcast time and we'll stop for the day. If this program has inspired you to join City Club, you can do so at the registration table as you leave the room. This is Greg McPherson, President of City Club. Please join me in again thanking the candidates and our moderator, as well as Shai-Yu Han of the Friday Forum Committee, who produced today's program, and Chris Trayball, who served as timekeeper. We are adjourned.